My name is Morin, and I'm sitting in an exhibition that I've just put together called The Vision Seeker. It's incorporating work that I've done over the last 2 years, some metal sculpture, some found objects, painting, and a lot of the things that I'll be talking about over this next half hour of ideas and methods of working. As well, I work with a lot of video images and some performance artists. So we do music as well. Part of the art that I'm exhibiting here is music that's being recorded by the people I play with, and there are many people that I play with. I work with a band called Rhythm Garden and another band called Fellini's Dream Orchestra, but also I've got a whole circle of friends that we get together and do music a lot. And it's a way of sharing art that we're hoping to do with this video. So come now into the exhibit, and I hope you get a little glimpse of the passion that I walk through this life with. I always have things on the go, so usually between projects I'm always involved in projects that will ultimately lead towards a show, an exhibition. I never know where it's going to begin, although I'd say the last 4 years most of my fine art could be categorized, or at least under the umbrella of a show that I had a couple years ago called Touch the Earth. Most of my fine art evokes in me, and hopefully in some of the people that witness it, a sense of the sacredness of the earth, and perhaps a sense of the sacredness of man's connection with the earth. The more I learn about native teachings and see that, you know, it's not just a phrase to say our earth mother. We are born of this earth. Everything that's in us is in all the living things of this earth, and we share this common mother, this Mother Earth. Most of my work, most of my inspiration, I think, is to try to trigger something of a respect or of a response to that sacredness. Whether it's through symbols that I've seen that some ancient person long ago through their vision quest carved on a rock, or whether it's a simple leaf falling on geometric moss that reveals something else under that moss. It's the earth. That's what I'm really working on. Putting together a show isn't on paper figuring out the bases you need to cover and covering them. It's more trying to think of as many things as you can from as many angles as you can, put them together cohesively. One thing I should mention about a show is that I might create 100 things that I think are going to be for the show, and when it actually comes down to the deadline, like now I've got 2 weeks to finish, many of those things will go unfinished. Many things that I hadn't anticipated will be finished beforehand. I really like the coming together though, because as I'm getting closer, that first year, you know, things are on the back burner, I've got these big ideas, but then as it gets closer and closer, when I'm mixing down the final tracks, I've got one last piece of music that I'll be working on tomorrow to finish. And there's such an excitement as the deadline's coming up. I've recruited talented musicians from Guelph, the Guelph area, Karen Bell and Robin Hume, who are Open Your Music Center. They're incredible teachers and artists of rhythms. And my work with them, my work with Gwen Swick, again, it's a coming together, and the music and the video is one area where I can actually share the creation, because generally, you know, and I design the music so that while you're in the exhibit, no musical event can ever happen twice over the course of that 2 months. So that you have, although it's pre-recorded music and tapes, you've got a musical event that'll never be repeated. So if you go to the show on Wednesday at 7 o'clock and then you visit it again on the weekend with friends, you're never going to be experiencing the same thing in the same way because of this constant change. I use a lot of sound. When I'm traveling, I'll record location recordings, sound of water or insects, nature. And quite often I'll begin a project or a theme of work based on some of those location recordings. I'll process them into music, like using them as bed tracks, and perform music, various instruments, percussion and synthesizer, and I'll shape a mood of sound. One of the ways I incorporate performance is just in the action of composing music. I get together with a lot of my friends and we actually just improvise music. And quite often those improvisations take place over location recordings that I've made in my travels. And based on those improvisations, the natural way that different artists working together give each other different ideas, I'll basically use that as a springboard towards visual ideas. So I'll take music that we've made and crafted and use that as an inspiration for sculpture or for painting. Quite often a lot of the paintings that I do, whether for book or just for fine art, begin with a piece of music. Most of my inspiration, and it's not just inspiration for work, but it actually comes from my own life experiences. So that when I'm traveling, the people that I meet, the cultures that I'm experiencing and essentially trying to absorb, all have profound influences on the way I look at things, but also in the way that I approach a specific task. I've done a lot of work in painting in China, and I'd done a children's book in China. And about 1.5 years later, after completing the project, I returned back to China just to paint. The way I travel is actually pretty funky, because I don't do a lot of pre-planning before I go on a journey. And one of the things that allows me to do is improvise with whatever unfolds in front of me while I'm traveling. I've started this ongoing series of paintings and video images that I'm calling Incidents of Travel. And what it does is it sort of documents the creative process that I go through while I'm opening myself to whatever happens, whatever unfolds in the travel. Actually, the painting that's behind me stems from that exact thing. It's called Incidents. And when you're in another culture, particularly a culture that's very different from the West, the rules are different. Everything about the culture is different. Everything that influences those people is quite a bit different. And it just keeps me almost in a constant mode of absorbing, so that when I go on travels, it's actually essentially charging my batteries. And it's these incidents that I experience in travels. And it might be as simple as a butterfly, by a pond in China that reveals the fish that are under there, and the fish are revealing something about the seaweed. I really enjoy the process of seeing worlds within worlds. And quite often, a lot of my work is just doing that. It's just perhaps taking us in closer into an idea or a texture. I like a lot of textures. I live an inspired life, and I have a lot of ideas, and the only way I can continue living is by manifesting those ideas. I really think that it's important to bring to life, the people that are lucky enough to have visions, to be able to visualize or to think about music and to compose. I think that those are such gifts of God, and they are muse, and that all we can do is work with them. So that for me, inspiration really comes from the work that I've done in the past and the things that I'm experiencing in the present. It's sort of a fusion of both of those things. In my fine art and more personal work, I think it's a similar sort of thing, searching for an inner symbolism of the past and the present. Like I'm really interested in pictographic or petroglyphic work. I'm quite driven by that first creative spark that man had when he, took a charcoal cinder and wanted to draw on the wall, whether it was a sun shape he was drawing or the hero figure within man, the beginning of religions. I'm really interested in that first creative spark, and that really is the one continuous thing that I see in a lot of my fine art, is this searching for that collective thing that is all mankind, and the way artists have always represented that thing. And it's so universal. The more I travel out into the world, the more I'm also traveling inside myself. And the more I'm doing both of those things, the more I see these universal themes that have always run in through the artist's mind. And I do get a lot of inspiration from that, certainly. So it could be said that I'm inspired by art. When I look at an old rock, a fossil, I was fortunate enough, quite a young age, to have an experience working in the Badlands of Alberta and holding 75-million-year-old dinosaur bones. And I remember the day that I first did that. Holding a bone of something that was alive 75 million years ago. All of those little kind of experiences are why I think I wanted to become an artist, is to transmit the feeling of looking at that 75-million-year-old fossil and holding it. How can I transmit that idea, that essence of the idea, to somebody that's never done that, and have them come away with looking at something with that feeling? And I think that's why I'm getting into more performance and installation type of work in my fine art, is that I really want people to have an emotional response with my work, because I have an emotional response with life. And that's my influence. So if I can get you to experience a little bit of that sacred connection of what it is that's inspiration or emotion, I'm bringing us all closer to sharing that. It's not important the place, but it was an experience in nature where I was overwhelmed. The whole conservation area is basically formed about 12,000 years ago with the receding glacier, and that the glacier water, the meltwater, carved these incredible limestone caves, which then, just from sheer time and weight, they all shattered, creating thousands of caves. And the river still goes underground for about a mile there. And it was just one experience I had, a whole day hiking and getting lost at night, and it changed my life. I had this nature experience, and that's actually that one event in woods, in forest, is that night I decided I was going to be a painter. That night I decided I was always going to paint forests in my heart, whether or not figuratively I was painting forests. Like painting the dark unknown, painting the subconscious that we go to in our dreams, but also that mankind always has to confront before the way the Ojibwe talk about it is going through the western doorway. Because when you're in a sweat lodge, there's four directions, the four sacred directions. The east is the beginning, the opening, and it's also the ending. But the western doorway is where the buffalo have gone, where we all go at the end of our lives. And we have to be comfortable with those four directions, the fact that we're beginning our lives at the beginning, and that we learn love, we learn knowledge, we learn respect while we're growing up, and then ultimately we go back into that circle. And like just sort of the realization of those things made me really feel aware that I did have a gift, and that gift was that I don't know what that gift is, but I know I've got a gift, and that essentially is why I have to be doing this. And the dedication to the knowing that this is what I have to be doing is what makes it happen. So that, like, some people that are very talented artists that I know and that know me might not have the absolute certainty that they've got to be doing this, and that prevents a lot of work, and it prevents a lot of passion to come out in the work. But when you have full wonderment, when you're willing to accept everything with full wonderment of a child and process it with the full intellect of an artist or of someone that is concerned about life, that's, you know, where that's the bed where art can happen. Not to suggest at all that it always happens, but that's where it can happen. And if you nurture that, it's only going to get better if you believe in it. Oxford University Press approached me on an East African story. They had a Maasai folktale, and the editor there had seen some of my African paintings. My parents lived in Africa about 15 years ago for a few years. And when I first went to Africa, it changed my life. I heard the rhythm of the heartbeat, and I discovered the drum. And both of those things have made a major effect on my life. In Africa, I instantly went back to the past. And then being offered this African book, I really saw it as a bridge. No longer was I just willing to take on commission for anything. I wanted it to be a life experience. And I was offered this book and decided that I would actually go and try to live with the Maasai and learn the way they do things, learn firsthand the way they see the world, so that I could take the way they look at the world, mix it with the way I look at the world, and have a book, the outcome of it. So the first project brought me to Africa. From that, I've journeyed to that book was called The Orphan Boy. And after that, I did a book called The Dragon's Pearl, which essentially did the same thing with ancient China. I traveled to small remote villages that basically have not changed that much in the last couple thousand years, where the story's set, and that too. And from there, I've now sort of established this little niche where I'm doing a lot of folk tales and living stories of indigenous cultures around the world. And one of the things that I'm finding so important about this is that in many cases these cultures still have these beliefs, and these ceremonies that they do are an integral part of who they are and who they were and where they come from. And I think it's also important for children. This is one of the reasons why I love this medium of children's books, is that children are pretty open-minded, and by exposing them to some of these cultures and the differences in cultures at a very young age, I think what we're doing also is we're wearing down prejudices before they, have the opportunity to be problematic for the person that's having them. Lately, I've been focusing, it seems, on Native American stories. I did a book called Fox Song a few years ago, which was a contemporary story just talking about how Native beliefs can still come into our lives. From that, I did a book on the Anasazi, the ancient cliff dwellers of the Southwest. That brought me down to Arizona, Utah, and New Mexico, to some of those sacred sites. And, it was pretty mind-expanding to realize that in America, 1,200 years ago, there were 10,000 stone cities, beautifully masoned stone cities. I really didn't fully understand how big that culture was that the Anasazi had. And from there, I've just completed a book. It's just been released, called The Ghost Dance, which studies the Native American ghost dance religion of about 100 years ago, when all the nations were coming together near the end because they knew their world was changing. And right now I'm working on a book on the Ojibwe sweat lodge ceremonies. The book's working title and the final title will be The Vision Seeker. And I'm working with an Ojibwe medicine man who's conducting sweats. He's teaching me what you can learn from a sweat lodge, which is many, many, many different teachings. I've been doing sweats for about 3 years now. I have a lodge in my backyard where I conduct sweats. And that is opening up a whole new thing, in that this is the first time that one of my assignments, a book project, has brought me into this world that's teaching me so much respect for the cedar, the Mother Earth that we live on, the grandfathers, these ancient rocks that are fossils. They're what life was, but they're also the dust that makes us up. I use a lot of cross-vocational influences in my work. Because I'm working with sound, video images, painting, sculpture, sometimes using a lot of found objects. A simple walk in the forest is not a simple walk for me anymore. Quite often I come back with 300 pounds of mossy logs. But I think that all of the different stimuli that I use, the media that I use, really co-influence each other. As I expressed earlier about sound being such an integral part of a painting for me, I really do see color as sound and sound as color. So even though I might be working on a synthesizer or with some location recordings of nature, I really do get a mood and a color emotion trigger from that. And likewise with the video images, I'm training myself to see very differently through that video camera. When I first started using a still camera, it was an ideal learning ground for me to compose within a rectangle. You know, like when you're thinking of stretching a canvas, an artist sitting in front of his canvas, there's always that shape, a predetermined shape that you're working within. Well, a still camera taught me how to compose within that rectangle, because I started using my camera not just to take pictures, but in fact to look at things from and select and zoom in, pull back, and really to study and analyze. And that taught my eyes how to study and analyze. And now what I'm finding is with digital technology and some of the simple digital effects you can get on a camcorder, that's training me to not only look at that window and look through that window, but then to break up and to manipulate within that frame. I'm working on a whole series of medicine boxes. It started early this summer when a whole slew of my friends got married, and I had to come up with novel art forms to complement their new lifestyle. And I was just playing with the duality, the man and woman that's in the masculine and feminine that's within each individual, but then within the couple. And these medicine boxes just started coming about by having children and people coming to my set, in this case, the gallery installation. I think I can show them a lot more than if I'm just clicking off slides of my work or slides of ideas. I can involve them in the creation of it. And I'm actually hoping on some levels that I might even be able to do that. Ultimately, I'd really like to be creating artworks while the show's running right there, so that, again, they're not seeing this wall between the person that comes up with these ideas and these images and themselves. I've always found that if you show a kid how to paint with your hand, boy, he's going to be doing some amazing paintings with his hands. And I think it can do a lot for all of us to see creativity in action, because it almost spawns creativity in our own lives.